Welcome to the Creative Condition podcast with me, Ben Talon, illustrator and creativity coach, founder of the Creative Condition, artist and writer. I bring 20 years of creative industry experience and a lifelong love of creativity, a fundamental pillar of human happiness, to you through ongoing personal exploration and the shared experiences of others. You'll get a nourishing mix of creative industry professionals and people far and wide using creativity in ways that can take our learning to the next level so we can maximize our unique blend. The show has been supported from day one by Illustration X, a tremendous illustration agency representing a shining global roster of illustrators and animators over at illustrationx.com. The music for the show is by Dirty Freud, who you can listen to now on all good streaming services. And for everything else, for my coaching, resources and inspiration, head to thecreativecondition.com.
Hello and welcome to the Creative Condition podcast. My name is Ben Talon. I am your host and founder of the Creative Condition, which you can now indulge in and get all my creativity resources that have been built over the last 15 years of unconscious and conscious study and 300 plus interviews and everything else at thecreativecondition.com. It's good to have you here. I apologise up front for my voice today because I'm just back off the couch and a rough few days with some kind of chesty virus. And I know a few of you have had it too. I've seen this stuff doing the rounds. It's that time of year. And I was mature enough to take a day's rest. I was under a blanket yesterday on the sofa watching some old wrestling, and I wanted to say it felt good. It was a silver lining. It didn't feel good. I felt shivery and slight headache, sore throat. All the symptoms were racking up. But I am back with you. But that is my disclaimer for this husky voice that you've got me with today. My wife keeps laughing at me because I sound a bit like Rod Stewart at times. And it's quite comical, but I'm feeling better. My tail's up a little bit today. I feel quite optimistic, despite finding out that my data has been bunged in some AI scraper. It's inevitable, really, isn't it? Sadly, the way of the world and everybody looking for the bottom line financially and all that. But a friend of mine found a tool, maybe I'll share the link on the social media, where you can, it basically looks at all the AI learning. I don't know what the term is, the AI things. And lo and behold, my name is in there with a few other friends, creatives. It's been done illegally, of course, before we've even got to a copyright thing with the UK government. That doesn't look particularly optimistic either. But I don't want to throw doom and gloom on you because that's not what I'm about. But I am adapting. I have been adapting since I learned about Midjourney. Going back 2 or 3 years now, a concerned friend called me up and said, are you worried? I said, about what? And he said, about AI. I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, look at Midjourney. So I looked it up, and quite quickly, I didn't freak out. I'm a believer in human creativity and artists. However, I also know that we live under a very rampant late-stage capitalism. Maybe not late-stage enough. And since that moment, I've been unconsciously reconfiguring my overall practice to bring greater stability. It's something that I've always done. I talked about this last week at UCLan. I did a talk at their Design Conference 14, which is a week's worth of industry speakers coming to the students in Preston, where I studied from 2003 to 2006. And I loved my time there, and I loved the lecturers who were still running the courses when I left. And spoke to the students, but it is something I talked about at length in my talk, was my desire to provide myself with greater stability than simply being an illustrator, because, well, I came from a working class background, and I worked shit jobs and jobs that weren't so shit but were unskilled and didn't pay great. I'll always be grateful for those jobs. Sad fact is, I knew that once I tasted the good stuff with a brain like mine that needed variation, and that once my living costs reached a certain point, because I've done well over the years through illustration, I couldn't just go and get a job if things went south. It just wouldn't pay me what I needed to pay to maintain my mortgage and look after my kids, and that's quite scary. So when I learned about Midjourney, I started to really push and double down on the creative condition and my writing and those human skills and empathy and everything else. And how do I throw all these things in the witch's cauldron and come up with a spell that will keep me in a job in the creative industries? And I'm still working it out today. It's why I've been pushing this podcast. I've been doing Creative Condition, I've done 3 pit stops so far this year, which is very exciting because it's a process I absolutely adore. I've been talking about it in recent months. The offer of a 2/3 price deal is still up there, thecreativecondition.com/coach. Go and have a look. You'll learn what the pit stop is. It's a 1-to-1 intensive audit of a person's foundational creativity, but also their human condition. We get into childhood. I've had certain people cry when I've done this process. It gets very deep. It's been described as somewhere between coaching and therapy, and that's what I love about it, because I love humans and I like to help them. And we go right back. We get into deep stuff. We get into barriers. We get into frustrations. We get into passions. And basically, I get you back to that sense of magic that you might have felt at art college or when you were starting your career, when things maybe didn't feel so heavy, but we all hit these crossroads and lose our way a little bit. And it's very hard for any of us to see our own big picture clearly. So that's what I do with the pit stop. It's a between 2.5 and 4 hour process. And then I go away and spend the same time again, if not longer, working back through the conversation, writing up very actionable, personalised notes of recommendation, complete with exercises to help get you out of your rut, see your picture clearly, and move forward with inner authority, confidence, and optimal creativity. So that's what that is. If that sounds good for you, get in touch via the form on the website, and then we can have a short Zoom call and no obligations, 10 minutes or so, 10-15 minutes usually. And by that time, we both come away with a good sense of whether we're a good fit. And I have turned people down. Sometimes people want more business coaching advice. It's not what this is. That does come into it, of course. If I see an opportunity to advise someone accordingly, then I'm going to do. But this is about human condition, about passion, about feeling good, about making the right decisions for yourself. But usually, we have a good chat. We feel good. And I go, awesome. There's loads of ways I can help you. Do you want to book in? And we book in and we arrange a date. I've done them all in person so far this year. So if you're in the south, southwest, southeast, and it's travelable, then we'll do that. If not, we do it over Zoom. That's also a lovely process. It's been quite intimate actually doing it over Zoom because we're both in our home, and there's something nice about the relaxed pace of it too. So anyway, that's about the pit stop. Today I'm back with the Creative Condition Creativity Diary, giving you my latest instalment of thoughts, musings, and introspections. I love doing this. It's helping teach me about creativity, and it enables me to write in a way that's not so formal and finalised as in opinion pieces that I like to write to. So that's what this is. So let's get into it. Big thank you to the founding sponsor of the show, Illustration X, awesome agency representing so many great global illustrators and animators. They are there at the heart of this conversation around intellectual property and AI, which is heated and going on at the moment. And we want the UK government to do the right thing because culture is critical to all of us. But if we can't make our living through this, if it's all handed to AI and the corporates, then where does that leave us? And where does that leave our communities? Worrying times. Let's fight for it. But let's get into it. This is the diary. 12th of February 2025, the little panel of gloom. I've reached a point where I land on some social media sites with my hand held up to cover the little panel of news headlines. That's how destructive they can be. Each morning, despite enjoying Scott Mills as the new host of BBC Radio 2's breakfast show, I prepare the family breakfast each day, bracing myself for the latest update on which leading global dickhead has said or done something outrageous and frankly stupid. Calculated? Yes. The news and the reported action? Do I have my head in the sand? Maybe. I picked this cause of elevating and teaching creativity because this daily bombardment of bad news was pushing me close to some kind of personal collapse. Collapse. That's the title of a record I'm designing the artwork for. In a creative exploration sense, there's a juicy brief. But too many people are battered incessantly with this abandonment of morals and head-scratching lunacy until they can no longer create. Not sustainably, at least. This came up during an interview with Love Creative founder David Palmer. He pointed to the bleakness of the Manchester scene, out of which emerged Joy Division, the Happy Mondays and so on. And he's right. The negative emotion spectrum is incredibly valuable and the bedrock of so much great art of all kinds. Ideas and innovation that could not have been brought about any other way. But I also believe that this is unsustainable in the long run. We are human, and there are limits to our resilience and the kind of responsive creativity our pain brings on. On my bad days, I cannot access this at all, and the doom overload leaves me sat grinding my teeth, staring out of the window. So, I hold up my hand. Sometimes I lunge for the plug when the radio news comes on. I have to curate my news consumption and be kind to myself, even though our evolutionary negativity bias makes it so easy to heap on another ladleful of big tech presidential politician prickery. 16th of February 2025. Weight Watchers coach. While fine-tuning my LinkedIn profile to make sure I'm as juicy as possible in a stupidly loud online meat market, I added coach to my list of skills. Just coach, not creativity coach or career coach or business coach. I mean, I'm not either of the latter two, even though there are certainly aspects of that. But only coach is asking for trouble. I haven't been approached to carry 60-odd people to London Victoria for a more affordable rate yet, but I've begun enjoying a certain dubious thrill of seeing what they do send me as suggested professional opportunities. The first was a Weight Watchers coach in Wiltshire. What happens is, my imagination takes the title and quicker than an AI image generator, plays a HD video in my head of what that looks like. It gets very silly very quickly. I'm like a latter-day Diego Maradona, full tracksuit and whistle, shuffling around a church basement, telling people about my own reckless and recently addressed sweet tooth, before descending into the psychology side of creativity, the small gains, the manageable goals, the value in the dark and the light and grey of our personality. But no, I have no place advising anyone how to drop pounds. So, I don't amend the skills setting, and wait. Southampton youth team football coach is next. I'm 14 again. The last years of the delusional professional football dream. I've interviewed Ben Ryan, the Olympic gold medal winner, as Fiji men's rugby sevens coach. That looks good on paper. I do adore sports psychology and I have a strong people skills thanks to my storytelling-driven observation and empathy. And it's the full tracksuit again. I'm in full red this time, having watched Chaos with my wife, Laura, recently, a beautifully stylish retelling of Greek mythology starring Jeff Goldblum in several enriched tracksuits. I entered a minor midlife crisis by doubling down on a previous threat to treat myself to a tropical print Adidas number and thick gold chain like a mafioso uncle, in which I'd march around Salisbury, seeking peak respect based solely on it. But something in all of this silliness stands out because I've come to learn that even the most whimsical trains of thought can pack value. There is something of a general coach inherent to my personality. I take a lot of joy from helping, motivating, guiding, refining people. Storytelling is my biggest thrill in life, and working out a person's arc is becoming a total fascination, even if they don't see it themselves. None of us do, not for decades at least. But coaching, the kind I've fallen in love with, is about becoming the hovering narrator, succinctly capturing the instinctive and natural behaviours and bottling it as trusted, actionable advice at the right times, or something like that. Next up, gymnastics coach. This time I'm in court, in a black tracksuit, representing myself against the lawyers of the people with legs where their ears should be. 16 February 2025, the 5-year-old's lunar broadcast. What? Do you know what I mean though? No, well, sort of. My poor wife has to suffer my neurotic bursts of grandiosity every couple of weeks. I've noticed a pattern that needs amending. Off the back of a testing spell, be it eco-anxiety, financial panic, or overloading myself with projects that could have waited. I'll find my groove again, and everything is possible. This time, I'm plotting an assault on BBC Sounds producers because my vision for the creative condition has grown. I'm a lifelong audiophile, which played a major role in starting the podcast that grew into the brand and cause in which you, dear reader, our listener, or listener, are now immersed, or playing in the background. And in this frenzied world of constant streaming content, who wouldn't want a Yorkshireman exploring creativity tucked away on some 1am graveyard slot on the BBC? When I feel this stuff, it is with such passion that I blather on as if my wife had been in my head, sharing the years of germinating ideas before they mature and burst out of my face in a multi-sensory, quickly spreading ambition virus. She reminds me that having not been made aware of this long-term thought process, I must realise that making sense of its sudden birth is a challenge. I stop and start to laugh, seeing her very fair point. My challenge, of course, is to save a little of this beautiful wonder, this energy and willingness to dream, so I don't repeat the pattern that invariably ends up in a burnout on the other side. Like my 2 5-year-olds, one of which stops halfway through finding a clue in her treasure hunt and shouts a request for the building of a tent in the front room. That's me, isn't it? That's my brain, right there. Yes, a 5-year-old who is suddenly certain they'd like to broadcast for the BBC from the surface of the moon. 16 February 2025, vestibule. I like the associated words, even if I don't know what they mean. vestibule, catacomb, priest hall. It used to conjure images of people in cloaks in shadowy nooks, conducting secret business. I went to a Catholic school, but I've never been a religious person. I like the belonging it gives people, and I find all religions interesting, but church was incredibly boring. Until the age of 12 or so, my dad occasionally took me on a Sunday morning. It was annoying because it meant I missed goals on Sunday, and the service, the readings, the hymns, the genuflections, and the dried disc of bread took forever. But it had a huge upside. I realised this on Sunday as we used our free resident of Salisbury access to the cathedral to take the kids and dog down for a look around. It's grandiose. In a city the size of Salisbury, quaint and more of a small town than a city, it feels like a Gothic religious Independence Day. When I look up at the colossal structure, it's 800 or so years old, and I find it happening again. Laura is reading a sign about how some old king's tomb to the kids, and my attention drifts over to a tour guide surrounded by 20 or so people. In mere seconds, her voice, imparting genuinely fascinating information, triggers a sleepy feeling in me. Conditioning. Years of lectures and sermons and tour guides in tourist attractions have created a learned brain behaviour. So I look up. Above us, maybe 30 or so feet, though in these buildings depth perception is distorted, so it could be much higher. There are arched windows on an upper level. Stone spotlit corridors run behind them, and the shadow cloaks are in there again. I smile, recalling those Sundays where I'd stare at the ones in my local church and my dad zoned out too. Back then, I'd imagine how cosy it could be to spend the night up there with a friend or a family member. I'd have a sleeping bag and find a corner. And if it was raining outside, I'd listen to it driving against the thick stone exterior and all that history. I'd light some of the little candles and it would be dreamy. I spent a good bit of time conjuring these narratives between 1988 and 1999 when I left all forms of Catholic institution, but clearly, as the narrative picks up anew, I never lost the sense of wonder these beautiful buildings awoke in me. Active boredom is a scarce creativity fuel these days. We're never far from something to keep us in our conscious brain state, and ultimately, ideas are worse for it. 18th February 2025, The Storyteller. Dave Grohl named his recent book The Storyteller. I loved that. Stories are quite possibly my greatest joy in the human condition. The limitless nature of them, the escape, the shades, sizes and styles. The tears, laughter, the rage they can stir in us despite absolutely nothing else changing around us. I grew up on them. My dad, who grew up in a breadline poor family, and his brothers learned to use them to get their adventures. They have great imaginations and take so much pleasure from stories. Stories become our binding culture. Humans, it is said, cannot truly know more than somewhere around 150 people. After that, you need a myth, a narrative, a binding mantra. Hence religion. Hence football fans referring to their collective club entity as us. It's why bigger businesses, agencies, have buzzwords like disruption to bind their staff and unite them in a common cause. I found myself waiting for a coaching client on Oxford Street outside Primark. Instead of going on my phone, I decided to people watch, look up and around. There's a bus stop on the other side of the road, the building behind it boarded up and covered in graffiti and fly posters. For a minute or two, I watch how people interact with the Donald Trump illustration. It's not complimentary. Then, the several floors above catch my eye. These windows, while not church old, are of another era. Maybe the 1970s, I wouldn't know. But they are clouded with dirt and dust, which obscures whatever might have once been going on inside. There's nothing in there now, no lights, no people moving around, no obvious contemporary use. And it gets me thinking, could artists stage a takeover? A theatre troupe who might put on a late night performance for intimate audiences of friends and peers. Homeless people. And there's an assassin, Jason Bourne, the Day of the Jackal style. And just like those dreamy church imaginings of sleepovers by candlelight, I'm in there again. My client arrives and I'm yoinked back into 2025 Oxford Street and my challenge to help realign her creativity, passions and personality. But an idea has hatched. A storytelling workshop idea. Putting this storyteller nature of mine to good use to help people, businesses and people. Beautiful active boredom. 22nd February 2025. Time slip / warp. Last Saturday I read a dinosaur book with my kids. 50 million years ago, 100 million years ago, 250 million years ago. The mind bends. I find it comforting when the world feels heavy. Donald Trump and our current ills will be farts on the wind soon enough, and it reminds me not to let the fuckers pull me under. On Sunday, Salisbury Cathedral tried to wow me with 800 years, and I just snigger, thinking of those gigantic beasts all that time ago. Historic! Ha! And yet, in Preston, where I spent 6 years, including 3 years of my undergraduate study on BA Honours in illustration, where I've returned to give a lecture at the UCLan Design Conference Week, I'm hammered by the realisation it was 22 years ago when I arrived with my several bags of possessions and a key to my halls of residence. 22! What is this? What is time anyway? They say it's all relative, Hawking and that, or something. Buildings I spent significant time in have disappeared, and I can't handle the deluge of memories and sensory ripples. Maybe I shouldn't have been so dismissive of the cathedral's efforts to impress. 24th of February 2025. We've lost Ken. I'm back at UCLan for the Design Department's Conference Week 14, where I'm giving my new talk, Where the Fuck Did That Come From? They're fiddling with tech when I sidle over to the display wall, upon which, as ever, Ken Garland stares back. Ken penned the First Things First manifesto in the 1960s, an iconic call to arms for creators to pledge all free time making work with meaning as opposed to commercial gain. I smile, having been as wowed by this form of activism as the other 5,000 or so students who have handed in a paper about the manifesto. And when the course leader, Andy, has prepared my slides, I ask him how many. He laughs, a tired chortle, but not without admiration. "Did he die, Ken?" he asks me. I hadn't wanted to confront the possibility. I'd spoken to Adrian Shaughnessy on the podcast in 2016, and back then, Adrian, who was good friends and an admirer of Ken, had alluded to Ken not being in the finest health. This encounter had come 3 years after Ken had me over to his house to chat for a voluntary awareness campaign on behalf of CALM, the campaign against living miserably. At 83 years of age, Ken paced his workspace as he spoke passionately about the ills of capitalism, the way the banks had blown the surplus wealth that belonged to all of us. We don't retire, you see. Not when we shape our lives around passions and find ways to get by in this harsh financial system. Ken hadn't retired, and his fire burned bright. His spirit, his outrage, and his joy swirled and melded like cosmic showers, and he showed me work pulling down books from his wall, one collating his work, designed by Shaughnessy's unit editions. I basked in his glow, even as he bollocked me for saying St. Martin's and not Central St. Martin's. This I loved. The antagonists have always been fascinating to me. He sent me away with a copy of his book, and so much inspiration that I ran the short distance back to Camden Station and swore off caffeine for the train back to Manchester. So, it was with sadness that my fears were confirmed. Ken had passed in 2021, but my ongoing fascination with the cycle of life, death and rebirth in nature, we as part of that, means I smile when I think of one of our industry greats, his tempestuousness, his craft, and his fights for what he believed in. Not gone, of course, but onto something new. He is one of two Kens to have made a colossal impact on my life, Sir Ken Robinson, of course, being the other. To have handed over a legacy I feel welcome responsibility to build upon through the creative condition. My life cause of elevating creativity's role in our lives, in healing the ills of our days, and two, at time, simply cope without falling apart. Thank you for listening, guys. That is the Creativity Diary from The Creative Condition. You can check it out and read now at thecreativecondition.com, or of course listen if that's where you're finding me. If you are listening, please do consider telling a friend about the show. It's the best way to promote and help me to further this cause that I just mentioned. Very sad to learn of the passing of Ken, as I wrote about there. I'll never forget the time he had me around to his house. I couldn't believe it. You know, this was a personal hero of mine, and one very much I'm glad that I met. A gentleman full of fire, passionate about his craft, and an inspiration to all. So that was beautiful. Big thank you to the founding sponsor of the show, Illustration X, and for Dirty Freud for producing the music for the show. Go and check out Dirty Freud, always producing great new tunes, working out of his studio in Manchester. Caught up with him last week, going on tour later this year. So I'll give a little nod to that when the time comes, and we've got some dates for you. Do check out the pit stop and the coaching if you want the personal experience. I would love to come to your agency and do the creative condition workshop with your employees to help them better understand creativity and fine-tune things that are maybe being overlooked and underestimated, to get them having better ideas, to be more engaged, to be energized, to be the best version of themselves. And if you're a freelancer, I'm happy to structure payments. That's something that's come up with each person so far. I've had people come to me and say, I really want to do this, but things are a little tight. I know it. I'm freelance myself. I get it. So I'm happy to stagger payment, structure it, however it works for you. So get in touch if you think it could be of help. thecreativecondition.com/coach. Fill out the little form. Give me the gist of where you're at, how you think I can help you. We'll have a Zoom conversation, no obligation. We'll see what the crack is. I will come up with some ideas and we'll book in a time and date to do it if you want to go ahead. And if you don't, no worries. Thank you for your interest. Next. Nobody loses. Cheers, guys. Thank you for listening as ever. Have an awesome week. The Creative Condition book is also available on the website, but also check out the other free resources, the reading list, and the 300+ episode archive of this show. It's been a pleasure having you. Cheers, guys. Have a great week. Take care.